I want to start today with a heist, but not a bank robbery or anything like that. We are going way back.
Way back.
Yeah, back to 415 BCE, downtown Athens.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to picture this scene. You have this guy, Alcibiades. He's basically the rock star of the ancient world. A famous general, brilliant politician, incredibly wealthy.
The whole package.
The whole package. And he decides to host this private little get-together at his villa. He sweeps down the marble staircase, and he's wearing the stolen robes of a high priest.
Which is already a huge deal.
A huge deal. And he pours this dark purple liquid from a crystal decanter for his friends. They drink it, and within an hour, the party has turned into something else.
Seeing visions. Terrified. Ecstatic. It's a total bacchanal. And by sunrise, Alcibiades is a wanted man. He has to flee Athens just to escape a death sentence.
But here's the critical detail, right?
Yes, this is the whole point. He wasn't condemned for the partying. I mean, the Greeks loved a good party.
Of course.
He was condemned for what was in the cup. He had stolen kykeon.
The forbidden elixir.
Exactly. Kykeon was the sacred technology of the Eleusinian mysteries. This was a 2,000-year-old ritual that shaped the minds of, Plato, Aristotle, Cicero.
So this wasn't just some drink.
No, this was the technology of the gods, and it was kept strictly behind the temple walls. Alcibiades didn't just steal a drink, he democratized divinity. He took the fire and gave it to his buddies.
Which brings us to the source material for today's deep dive. Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheal. And that central metaphor is, obviously, Prometheus.
The titan who stole fire from the gods to give it to humanity.
Right. And the authors are arguing that we are seeing a modern Promethean revolution. We have Navy SEALs, Silicon Valley billionaires, maverick scientists, and they're all effectively doing what Alcibiades did. They're scaling ecstasis.
Ecstasis is such a great word. It's Greek for stepping beyond oneself. In modern terms, we're talking about altered states of consciousness.
Flow states.
Flow states, exactly. And the premise of the book isn't just that these states are fun. The premise is that they're becoming a requirement for survival in this high-speed world we live in.
That's the part I want to deconstruct first. Because usually when we talk about altered states, you think of, hippies in a drum circle.
Right.
But the book starts somewhere completely opposite to that. It starts with a silent raid in the mountains of Afghanistan.
This is the story of Al-Wazoo. It's September 2004. You have SEAL Team 6 Devidruyu, the elite of the elite.
Best of the best.
And they are hunting a high-value target who has already escaped custody once. Intel puts him in a compound in the high desert. And the terrain is just a nightmare barren, zero cover.
And the mission constraints are, they're absurd. They have to capture him alive.
Yeah, so you can't just call in an airstrike.
No, they have to hike a mile to the target in pitch blackness without making a single sound. And Commander Rich Davis, who led the unit, made this point that really stuck with me.
What's that?
He said the hardest part of being a SEAL isn't shooting. It's knowing when not to shoot.
Precisely. If one guy trips, if one guy coughs, if one guy panics and fires at a shadow, the mission is blown.
And they probably all die.
Right. So how do they coordinate that? They don't use hand signals. They don't use radios. They use what they call the switch.
This is where the psychology gets so fascinating. The switch isn't a piece of gear. It's a mental shift.
It's a shift from individual consciousness to a hive mind. It's group flow.
When they flip that switch, the I disappears.
And the we takes over. They describe it as a literal merging of consciousness.
But let's look at the mechanics of that, because it's not magic, it's training. They have this concept called dynamic subordination.
Yeah, this is so cool.
Usually in the military, you have a strict hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Captain gives the order, lieutenant repeats it, and so on. But in the stack, approaching that compound, who's in charge?
Whoever has the best data, that's dynamic subordination. If the point man sees a threat, he is the leader. Instantly. If the situation shifts and the rear guard sees something, he becomes the leader. No vote, no discussion. It's a fluid hierarchy based entirely on situational awareness.
So they breach the compound, they flow into the room like water, they find Al-Wazoo sitting in a chair, AK-47 across his lap.
And in a microsecond, the entire team processes the visual data. His eyes are closed. He's asleep.
They don't fire, they wake him up.
Davis said the look on Al-Wazir's face when he opened his eyes to see these black-faced SEALs standing silently in his living room was just the definition of shock.
I can imagine.
But here's the so what for us. The Navy spends about $500,000 to train one SEAL, but the washout rate is astronomical.
And it's not because they can't do enough push-ups.
Not at all. They are washing out because they can't flip the switch. They can't let go of the ego enough to merge with the group.
So for the SEALs, accessing this state of ecstasis is literally life and death. But let's pivot. Let's take that same concept, high stakes, chaotic environment, and apply it to a completely different world.
Silicon Valley.
Let's talk about Silicon Valley.
Right, so you trade physical death for career death. It's 2001. Google is still a startup.
And Larry Page and Sergey Brin are brilliant, but they're unmanageable. The investors are pulling their hair out. They demand the founders hire a CEO, adult supervision.
But Larry and Sergey have already interviewed, 50 top executives?
And they hated all of them. They think these traditional CEOs are just too rigid. They can't handle the speed of Google.
They needed someone who could navigate VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments. But they also needed someone who wouldn't try to, impose a rigid hierarchy on Google's engineers.
So they came up with a filter.
An unconventional one. They didn't look at MBA score.
They looked at Burning Man.
He looked at Burning Man.
Which sounds ridiculous on paper. We need to run a billion-dollar company, so let's find a guy who hangs out in the desert wearing goggles.
I know. But there's a specific mechanism at play here, right? It's not just about liking art.
It's about communal vocational ecstasy.
That's the term from sociologist Fred Turner. And think about the environment of Burning Man. The Black Rock Desert. It is physically punishing. It is chaotic.
There's no money.
No money. It operates on a gift economy. So you can't buy your way out of a problem. You have to collaborate.
You're forced into radical cooperation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The harshness of the environment triggers this neurochemical cocktail: oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. These are bonding chemicals. If you can thrive there, you aren't operating on market norms. I do this, you pay me that.
Right.
You are operating on social norms. We do this together because we survive together.
So they see Eric Schmidt on the list, and he's the only finalist who had been to Burning Man. Brin basically says he's the only one who gets it. And it worked. Schmidt didn't try to crush Google's culture. He surfed it. He managed the chaos without killing the fire.
And the numbers.
Revenue went from $100 million to $40 billion under his watch. That's a 40,000% return on investment. Okay, so we have the military application and we have the corporate application. But I want to get under the hood. We keep using these terms like flow and ecstasis, but what is physically happening in the brain?
This is where the science gets really solid.
The authors use the acronym ESTERO to describe the state. Let's break that down, because I feel like this is where the woo-woo becomes biology.
It is. ESTER stands for selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. Let's start with selflessness. This is the big one. In a normal waking state, you have a voice in your head.
The inner critic.
Yeah, the inner Woody Allen, as they call it. It's constantly narrating your life, judging you, worrying about the future.
That voice lives mostly in the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
Right. Think of the PFC as the CEO of the brain. It's obsessed with long-term planning, risk management, but in a flow state, we experience transient hypofrontality.
Which just means?
Transient means temporary, hypo means less. Frontality refers to the prefrontal cortex.
The CEO takes a coffee break.
The CEO takes a coffee break. The brain shuts down the editor. And that's why people feel such relief. It's not just that they're focused, it's that the nagging voice just shuts up.
And because the CEO isn't there second-guessing everything, the brain's processing speed skyrockets.
Which leads to timelessness. The PFC also handles our perception of time. When it goes offline, we drop into what they call the deep now. Past and future just disappear.
Then you have effortlessness.
This is the chemical hook. The brain dumps a massive cascade of performance-enhancing neurochemicals. Norepinephrine, dopamine, endorphins, anandamides, serotonin.
Painkillers and pleasure drugs, basically.
Exactly. It makes the activity feel intrinsically rewarding. You aren't forcing yourself to work. The work itself is pulling you along.
And finally, richness. This is the one I always struggle with. Is it just that things look brighter?
No, it's about information processing. Your conscious mind, the CEO, can handle about 120 bits of information per second. That's enough to listen to me or check your phone, but probably not both. Your subconscious, however, can handle billions of bits. When the CEO steps aside, that filter is removed. You're suddenly processing vast amounts of pattern recognition. You see connections you would normally miss.
It's big data for the brain.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And the stats on this are just startling. McKinsey did a study showing that executives in flow are 500% more productive.
And DARPA found snipers learn 490% faster. Think about that 500% number. It means you could come into work on Monday, spend the day in flow, and take the rest of the week off.
And you still get more done than your peers.
More done.
But, and here's the giant pivot in the book, we aren't just stumbling into these states anymore. We are building an economy around them. The authors calculated the altered states economy, and the number is staggering.
$4 trillion.
$4 trillion. That number just stops me in my tracks. That's more than the GDP of the UK.
It implies this is a primary biological drive. We spend more on altering our consciousness than we do on, well, almost anything else.
And that bucket includes everything, right?
Everything. The coffee you drank this morning, the beer after work, cigarettes, but also action sports, immersive video games, pornography, social media.
The scroll.
The scroll is a dopamine loop designed to alter your state. We are desperate to get out of our standard waking consciousness.
So if this is such a huge part of being human, why does it feel so underground? Why do we have to steal the fire?
Because of what the authors call the pale. Historically, society builds a fence, a pale around acceptable behavior. Inside the fence is safe, predictable. Outside is dangerous. And they identify 3 pales that have kept this revolution hidden.
The first one is the pale of the church. This goes right back to our Alcibiades story.
Right. Organized religion has always been wary of direct access to the divine. Look at Joan of Arc. She was a devout Christian, led armies to victory, but she heard voices directly.
She bypassed the priesthood.
She stole the fire. So the church burned her alive. The message is pretty clear. You need a middleman.
Then there's the pale of the body. This one feels very American to me. It's the Protestant work ethic applied to biology.
It's the skin bag bias. We have this cultural belief that if you achieve a state of peace through, say, 20 years of grueling meditation, that's virtuous.
But if you achieve a similar state using technology or pharmacology.
If you hack it, that's cheating.
But is it cheating? Or is
Yeah.
it just efficiency?
Well, that's the debate. But the bias is real. We value the suffering that leads to the result more than the result itself.
And the third fence is the pale of the state. And this brings us to that whole controversy with David Nutt in the UK.
This is where policy just clashes with science. David Nutt was the drug czar for the UK government. His job was to rank drugs by how harmful they were.
And he looked at the data.
He looked at the data and concluded that equizy, his term for addiction to horseback riding, was statistically more dangerous than taking ecstasy or MDMA.
Wait, hold on. Riding a horse is more dangerous than ecstasy.
Statistically, if you look at serious adverse events per usage, yes. Horseback riding results in a lot of spinal injuries, broken bones. Pure MDMA has a very low toxicity profile compared to the danger of falling off a large animal.
But you can't say that out loud.
He did, and he was fired immediately. Because the state isn't operating on raw data, it's operating on cultural norms. Alcohol is dangerous but sanctioned because it fits the work hard, play hard model.
Right.
Psychedelics were demonized because they're associated with counterculture. Nutt touched the third rail of the pale.
So the fences are there, but, and this is the whole premise of the book, the fences are coming down. We are seeing a convergence of 4 forces that are breaking the seals.
Psychology, neurobiology, pharmacology, and technology.
And it's not just about getting high anymore. It's about healing.
That's the most important shift. We are moving from recreational to transformational. Look at the psychology of trauma. For decades, the best we could do for PTSD was symptom management.
Now with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, we are seeing cure rates that are just unheard of.
And it's not just drugs, it's embodied cognition, the idea that you can change your mind by changing your body.
Right. There was that fascinating study on Botox, and this one blew my mind.
So people get Botox to paralyze the frown muscles in their forehead. The study found that these people actually reported feeling less depression.
Wow.
Because the brain takes cues from the face. If you can't physically frown, the brain just assumes you aren't sad.
So fake it till you make it is actually a biological law.
It really is. But there was a downside. They also had trouble feeling empathy.
Oh.
Because when we talk to someone, we subconsciously mimic their facial expressions to understand what they are feeling. If your face is frozen, your empathy loop is broken, it just shows how interconnected our physical and emotional states are.
And then you have technology. We talked about the seals, but let's talk about the future of that. The authors mentioned a story about Nike and submarine crews.
This is where we get into precognition, not magic, but data. Nike wanted to understand team dynamics. They looked at research on submarine crews where scientists monitored their biometrics, heart rate, EEG, skin response.
Okay.
And they found they could predict, weeks or even months in advance, which crews would successfully flip the switch into group flow during a crisis.
Just by looking at their biological sync in the present.
Yes. They could see the fire building in the data before it ever manifested in reality. That is the Promethean aspect of technology. We aren't just guessing anymore. We are measuring the unmeasurable.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture, we've stripped away the mysticism. We know the neurobiology, the ESTER model. We know the techniques like risk and group flow. We have the technology. What's the fundamental shift here?
The shift is that we are moving from viewing our psychology as an operating system, a fixed OS that you're born with, to a user interface, a UI.
I love that analogy. So instead of saying, I am an anxious person, which sounds like a hardware problem,
You realize, I am currently running an anxiety loop. And because we understand the knobs and levers, whether that's breathing or a power pose or a specific substance or a tech tool, we can intervene.
we can adjust the UI. We can change the channel.
We can change the channel.
But that power brings us right back to the beginning, to Alcibiades. He stole the fire and, well, he got burned.
He did. Fire is dangerous. If you use these tools just to escape, to numb out, to avoid your life, that is the $4 trillion economy of distraction.
That's checking out.
That's checking out. The challenge is to use these tools to check in.
And that's the thought I want to leave everyone with. We know these states exist. We know they boost productivity by 500%, creativity by 200%. We all have wicked problems in our lives and in the world. That logic alone hasn't solved.
Right.
So what if we stopped trying to escape reality and started using this fire to actually change it?
What problem is sitting on your desk right now or in your life that needs a 500% boost to solve?
That's the question. Thanks for taking the dive with us today.
Always a pleasure.